Thank you all so much. We are so excited. And this is the keynote panel and the final panel of the conference. So thank you all so much. And we are excited to get started. I am Kiki Bowman. I'm the head of communications here. I'll be your moderator for this. And so I will just introduce briefly the theme of the panel, and then I'll introduce our speakers. And there'll be a Q&A, of course, after the interventions. So, science communication. As we've heard, science communication faces many challenges. And to highlight just three, there's just bridging the gap between scientific knowledge and public understanding. Complex concepts are obviously difficult to understand. Combating misinformation, disinformation, and building trust, especially in this era of rapid information spread. Engaging audiences effectively, ensuring inclusivity and cultural relevance. And of course, all of these are also felt differently in different regions. So tackling these challenges requires strategies that are both context specific and globally informed. From a United Nations standpoint, strengthening science communication is central to advancing the Sustainable Development Goals and ensuring that science serves as a global public good. It is not only about sharing knowledge, but also about building global solidarity, empowering local voices, and making science accessible and actionable for all societies. By promoting open science and equitable participation, the UN seeks to close both the communication and capacity gaps between regions, ensuring that scientific progress benefits everyone, everywhere. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Mahaletchumy Arujanan is the Executive Director of the Malaysian Biotechnology Information Center. She is a science communicator from Malaysia with extensive experience working across countries and scientific communities. Maha holds a PhD in science communication and a master's of biotechnology from the University of Malaya, as well as a degree in microbiology from the University of Putra, Malaysia. She is the founder and editor-in-chief of the Pichirish, Malaysia's first science newspaper, and co-founder of the Science Media Center Malaysia. She also established the Asian Short Course on Agrobiotechnology, Biosafety Regulations, and Communications. She was listed among the world's 100 most influential people in biotechnology by Scientific American Worldview, and included in the Women in Biotechnology Law and Regulation honorific list by Biotechnology Law Report. She won the 2010 Third World Academy of Science Regional Prize for Public Understanding of Science for East, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. Maha?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you, Kiki. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm going to completely change gear now. I think for the past 2 days, we've been talking about open science, AI, very technical things, and there's bits and pieces of science communication. Even today, I still see the conversation was still along open science. So complete change of gear, no technical jargon, no scientific jargon, and no UN lingos. Just science communication, how we are going to reach to the intended stakeholders. And I'll talk about who are the stakeholders as well. So here is my title, Science Communication, an Underestimated and Misunderstood Tool, which I saw even during our discussions as well. So I'm going to talk about why is it misunderstood? Why is it underestimated? Why is it underestimated? It's relatively new. I know open science is about 10 years, science communication about 50 to 60 years, but still compared to any other sciences, it is still very new. It's not well understood even among the scientists. Okay, it's interchangeably used as scientific communication. I'll come to that in a bit. And how science communication impacts research, development, commercialization is misunderstood as well as underestimated. And there is no national strategies. I don't know if any of you in your countries, there is a national policy, national strategy for science communication. This is what we need to do, a top-down approach. There is lack of capacity building, talent development. Many of our countries, we don't have academic programs in science communication. If we look at Africa, there is probably South Africa and Uganda, I think Makerere, a bit of science communication programs, and even many other countries, not just Africa, Malaysia, only one university offers that. NUS, National University of Singapore, offered Masters in Science Communication, which is now discontinued. So, it's very painful for me to be a sort of pioneer in this field in Malaysia. So there's a lack of funding for training, capacity building, anything about science communication. It's done as like an ad hoc. Okay, I've got some time. I'll go to some schools. I'll talk to some policymakers. So it is done like when I have time, when I feel like doing, when there is a huge crisis like the pandemic, now let's communicate. So it's always like ad hoc. Most players go for low-hanging fruits, vested interest, and crisis management. Crisis management, like during pandemic. Vested interest, I've got a product, I want people to talk about it. I want people to use it. I've got something ready for commercialization. I want technology transfer. I will communicate now. Low-hanging fruit, I'll go to schools, speak to all these students and make science look like a magic, give them, make science look like, it's fun. So it's low-hanging fruit. Now, open science, that's what we have been talking for the 2.5 days. Now, I'm using food security as an analogy to explain what I saw. In fact, I changed my slides today because I thought there's a lot of things that I need to bring up. So think food security. When we say food security, there's a misunderstood conception that there is enough food, there is food security. That's not the case. There may be enough food. Can I afford that? Do I know how to use this food? Like if you suddenly give me something that only available in Japan and I bring it to Malaysia and I say, let's eat this, we don't know how to cook that Japanese herb or Japanese vegetable. It's no use for us. So it must be accessible, it must be usable, it must not be contaminated hygiene-wise, that's food. So in the same case, open science is good, it's inevitable, it has to come. But is that enough to get to all the stakeholders that we are intended to reach out to? Politicians? Which politicians reads the journal? Or even just at least an abstract? Policymakers, farmers, industry players. So, doctors. If you go to a doctor, they will tell you, you should not eat this, you should not do this, genetic modification is bad. But is that science-based? So, we think these people are experts, but they are actually not experts in a different field. So the same way, food security, open access is good, as I said, but can a farmer understand if it is available? If it's accessible, it's available, but will they understand? Can they translate that into actionable approaches? So this is a problem. And Dr. Leslie Chan, he said about how AI is feeding us. AI is asking us, do you want me to make a summary of what you would like to see? So what AI will do is it will cherry pick. Because, it's just like if I keep looking for hotel in Osaka, then the next thing I see, hotels in Osaka keep coming in my website, in my Instagram, in whatever, right? So AI knows what I'm looking for. It will feed me just that. And it could be cherry picking. So the same thing with open access. If we allow AI to control this, and even if it is accessible, is that really translated into credible, accurate science that I can understand if I'm not in that field? So I think this is important. So that's why I use food security as an analogy to show how open access is just not enough to get to all the stakeholders. So women are not at the table in many countries. Women farmers do not sit at the town hall meetings to decide what seed they want to buy for the next season. Women entrepreneurs are not getting enough grants. So open access, even if it is accessible, how are they going to use it? 1/3 of global population do not have internet access. That's how many percent? 2.8%, and 2.8 million. There's a mistake here. 2.8 million people, and 32% of global population do not have access to internet. So open access, who is this reaching out to? Indigenous knowledge, grassroots innovation, the previous panel spoke about that. So is that in open access? A lot of big journals want to see international impact and not something that's local-centric, national-centric. So, this is just not enough. So this is where science communication fills in the void, the broken lines, and it's so important. So what is science communication versus scientific communication? A lot of scientists feel, I've published my paper, I spoke at this conference, I've got my poster, oral presentation, I've done science communication. No, you are still talking to your peers. You're talking to the same experts that you are in the same field. Science communication is speaking to non-technical experts. If I'm a biotechnologist, if I'm talking to an engineer, that's science communication. If I'm talking to someone really outside my field, farmers, women, policymakers, politicians, even religious authorities. And it is so important that we speak to religious authorities because they have a say in what can be approved, what cannot be approved. Scientific communication, open access is so important because that's where Madam, you said that, science has to be challenged. Science has to be contested because that's where body of knowledge grows. So that's important. But science communication is equally important to fill in all the gaps. So another word like fish and fishes, right? We hardly say fishes, but public and publics. We say publics in science communication because there's no one group of homogeneous public. And I can speak the same language, the same tone, the same style, same analogy, same benefits, and everyone is happy about the science. No, publics is made of very heterogeneous group, diverse, complex group, individuals who are, who are our target audience, but they're very diverse. So these multiple stakeholders, such as policymakers, politicians, regulators, farmers, and name it, and scientists, because in my field, someone else is still a non-expert. In their field, I'm a non-expert in their field. So even scientists comes under publics. So we need to, look at how we can customize. So open science, how do we, it's good, as I said, but how do we customize so that it reaches to various stakeholders in different language? When I say language, it does not mean my language or your language, but the lingos that's used, the style, the content that's used, even relevant benefits. If you tell me some benefits, it might not be relevant to me. It might be relevant to him. So we need to repackage, customize it. So what is the impact of science communication? We heard about open science, right? Now, I can be an excellent scientist in my field. I can be doing great work, scientific work in my lab, but will that come out or get to the hands of my intended stakeholders, say the farmers? It may not if the policies and regulations are not science-based, they're not enabling. So how do we influence policies and regulations which are developed by lawyers, politicians? So here we need to communicate science to these people. So that's where science communication is very important. Collaboration, cooperation to technology transfer, to bring research, to commercialize research. Science diplomacy, that's another big word, diplomacy for science. Science for diplomacy. So these are huge things. I'm not going to go into that. Harmonization, policy harmonization, like AI. This huge, AI is a huge jargon that needs to be dissected. We need policy harmonization in AI. We need policy harmonization in gene editing, in genetic modification. How do we develop future talent? We all know in all countries, global south, global north, students do not want to take STEM subjects. They don't even want to study these days. So how do we inspire them to still study science and make science a culture? Citizen participation, we spoke about that. I really enjoyed the previous panel about citizen participation. How do we get indigenous knowledge, make citizen set the priorities, directions, so the country listens to citizens and what they want, and not just simply, can we all put our money in what they call it, humanizing Mars, but then when we don't even understand what's under in our ocean, right? So citizen has to have a say in all these things, so that there will be entrepreneurship as well. Citizens, youth can get into entrepreneurship, whether it's technopreneur, agropreneur, biopreneur. So this is where science communication comes in. So science really, the fruits of science is really realized. So why now? I mean, it has been important since so long ago, but why now? I hear that we see the survey that science that's trust in scientists is growing, or some countries is lesser. But to me, being also in social science, a survey is a survey. How people behave outside is completely different. Yeah. So people will say, I will not buy GM food, but in the supermarket aisle, they will look for the cheapest thing. So they completely behave differently. So today, we are living in a world where it's post-truth, post-trust, post-expert. I innocently thought that COVID will shift the public trust towards science and scientists and towards vaccine, but the reverse happened, right? So, this is what we are all living. Lack of trust in public institutions, anti-globalization, anti-multinationalism, new citizen driven democracy, increased empowerment of consumers. There's so many consumer-based organizations which are completely not science, celebrity opinion leaders, public health. So the whole loads of things there that is driving people away from experts and science. And why now again? We're talking about One Health, we're talking about planetary health, emerging technologies. There are so many technologies coming out every day, but policies and regulations and public engagement is always lagging behind. So how do we catch up with the innovation? The echo chambers of social media is the new university. Okay, you want anything, just go to social media. There's, people are just all experts there. So the citizen scientists, experts, green movements, lay expertise, extreme science communication model. I think someone spoke about science communication model. We can, there's a lot to speak about the different models. And then I strongly believe all these 17 goals here, every goal, even gender equality, science has a role to play. And this is where communication is so important. And when we talk about science, we think, okay, science is confined to my Ministry of Science, or if you call it Department of Science, Technology, whatever. No, science is everywhere. In the Ministry of Women, in the Ministry of Rural Development, in the Ministry of Forestry, Environment, Defense, Transport, science is everywhere. So are we engaging all these policymakers? Are we putting them together? And we know that ministries, department, they are known to work in silos. So science communication is what's going to break the barriers and bring them together. So why is it important? Again, science does not belong to the elites. When I was in school, when we went into, we were streamed into science stream, art stream, depending on our results. And I was in science. And those days, we felt so proud that I'm in science stream. It was like cream of the cream when you go to science. But no, science does not belong to the elites. It does not belong just in the ivory towers. It has to be democratized. And we need public dialogues for that. Informed decisions by the public. This is where people make decisions, wrong decisions that's not science-based on climate change, politicians, and about COVID, about disease management, public health. Public health literacy is very low in, I think, most of the countries, right? So research, science diplomacy, as I said, and diplomacy in science, all these mega multinational projects. There's so much about communication that takes place, and research input back to the people. So what's the way forward? Now, I know I'm not someone in authority to say this, but this is my ambitious thing that I always share, that a national policy, a science communication policy and strategy, every country, if not, it will be ad hoc, it will be firefighting. So it has to be established, we have to establish science communication office in all universities and research institutes. We don't have to have a big team, but each university, someone working on science communication, supporting the scientists on, if they have an interview the next day in a radio, in a TV, they are briefed how to speak, what to speak, how to do risk communication, how to write a press release. And remember, the PR people in the university do not do that. They're about branding the institute, not about talking about the science or research. Introduce science communication module, even if it is not a full-fledged program, at least any students taking up STEM degree program, 1 or 2 modules on science communication. So when they come out, they know how to engage the different stakeholders. And this is my favorite. Include lay person abstract in all journals. So there's a 200-word abstract. I mean, if it's not my field, I will not understand that abstract. But if there is a layperson abstract, 200 words, and a policymaker will understand that, a politician will understand that. Allocate a small percentage. If I get $5 million for my research project, 1%, 2%, how many percent? I mean, has to be allocated for public engagement. That means I do the research, but this amount, I have to engage the public, the stakeholders who are relevant to my research. Training, this is capacity building for scientists on science communication. And as I made an intervention just now, scientist performance to be based on how much public engagement they do, not just publication. Postgraduate program in science communication, and hybrid of different field. Science communication is a hybrid of different field. It's not just understanding science and we can communicate. There's psychology to it, there's consumer behavior, there is political policy, there's religion, there's ethics, culture, and geopolitical tension as well. We have to take into consideration when we do science communication. So, we all know this journal. Now, my ambitious project is also have an international journal for junior scientists, anyone below university level. And, these people do go for a lot of international innovation competitions. And when they come back, okay, I did this is my innovation, and it's chucked aside, and then they just move on to their next class. Now, can we document that in the same way we document our research? But just 3 pages, but written in a journalistic way. The same abstract keyword, introduction, materials, method. Why? We are training them to think systematically, like a scientist. And we are also inspiring them to be a scientist. So, big idea, but it's still just on the paper. So this is the newspaper that I founded in Malaysia. Unfortunately, after 14 years, I've stopped printing because there's no funding. But I want to go into, we already have the portal, but it's running on a very old website engine. And I want to make this a regional media. Why? Because we want to know what's happening in Thailand, we want to know what's happening in Indonesia, and Indonesia knows what's happening in Malaysia, or even make it like India, as far as India, international, so that there's technology transfer, there is collaboration, cooperation. We can share resources, we don't have to duplicate things. So that is the idea. Anyway, still on the paper. So a lot of ideas. And recently, I'm also talking to University of Nottingham, Malaysia. There's a campus in Malaysia, and they are very keen to set up Asian Institute for Science Communication, where we can do capacity building for science communicators, national associations for science communicators, recognition, policy papers, and become like a think tank. So that is all from me. Thank you so much. And these are my socials. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and I have a lot to say, and I really want to talk about customization. But before we do, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Maher Nasser. Maher has over 37 years of work experience in the United Nations system, during which he has worked in Amman, Cairo, Dubai, Gaza, New York, and Vienna. As the Director of Outreach in the United Nations Department of Global Communications, Maher leads the department's engagement with academia, advertising industry, civil society, creative community, libraries, sports, and football. The outreach division that he leads manages public engagement through the UN publications, visitor services, exhibits, and guided tours at the UN headquarters in New York, as well as key observances on select and high-profile mandates for the United Nations General Assembly. In addition to serving 3 times as acting Undersecretary General for Global Communications since 2012, Maher led the successful United Nations presence at Expo 2020 in Dubai as Commissioner General of the United Nations at Expo 2020. In February 2024, United Nations Secretary General designated Maher as the Commissioner General of the United Nations at Expo 2025 in Osaka, Japan. Maher graduated in civil engineering from Birzeit University in Palestine in 1980 and obtained a postgraduate diploma in business administration from Warwick University in the United Kingdom. For a life and work dedicated to and advocacy for human rights and sustainability, Maher was awarded an honorary doctorate by De Montfort University in the United Kingdom in 2024. Thank you.
Good afternoon. And thank you, Kiki. You didn't have to go through that. Just my name is enough. And then you can look me up. I think on behalf of the Department of Global Communications, I would like to really sincerely thank our host, the United Nations University, Rector Marwala, but also Kiki and her team that really made my colleagues feel at home and have made this conference possible. I would like to also thank all of the collaborators who have made the deliberations as interesting, and I regret not being here from the start. All the distinguished panelists and speakers who have joined, coming from different parts of the world, thank you. Thank you to all participants who are here in person or online, including on a Saturday. So I think that is particularly welcome. Thank you also to colleagues from the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA, and UNESCO, who have collaborated with the Dag Hammarskjöld Library, with my colleagues, Thanos, Megs, Mayomi, and others who are back in New York. I think thanks especially also to them. Many foundations and institutions have supported this conference in kind or in funding, so we really are indebted to them. That includes Science Europe, ISKME, and Spark. If I have forgotten anybody, Thanos will mention them in his remarks. I think I read the communique that more or less summarizes what you have agreed to publish after this conference. And I will not get into it because you have done a great, concise and articulate rendering of the deliberation over the last 3 days. But in terms of the priority actions for consideration, I always say the conference's work starts after the conference and it doesn't stop with a communique. So those priority actions, each and every one of you here or online, I think you need to start thinking, how can we move those along? Because that is important. Science is important. Science is why we are here. All of our communications tools are the result of scientific exploration, findings, and innovations. The way we travel here because humans and science, it's all science. Everything is science. But communications is also important. And I think Maher, previous panelist, spoke eloquently about science communications. Communicating about science and scientists communicating is, I would probably dare say, is as complicated, probably more, than communicating about the United Nations. I have been working in the UN for 38 years, most of it in communications. It's a very complicated organization. We deal with, of course, member states are our masters. They come and meet and we publish reports and resolutions. And they are written in what we call UNese, UN language that people who have been at the UN for many, many years understand. It's a bit like scientific papers that physicists will understand, chemists will understand their own field, but the average person outside is not going to understand. And we have that challenge at the UN. People look at the UN and they read the Charter of the United Nations. It starts with the words, "We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war that twice in our lifetime have brought untold horror," blah, 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 blah. And then they look and they see Ukraine. They look and they see Gaza. They look and see Sudan. And they look and see climate change, that we have promises, we have the Paris Agreement, we have governments backtracking on those commitments. They look at the Sustainable Development Agenda and they think, wow, that was great. 2015, we will have no poverty, no hunger, everybody will have education, health, gender equality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the year 2025, SDG report, we're only 35% of the targets are on track. We're off track. So where is that? So then they look at the headlines, but the headlines don't tell all the stories. And I think this is where maybe I want to share something about what we did at Expo in 2025 here in Osaka that just ended last Monday. in Japan, according to a survey done by Dentsu, major advertising, one of the big 6 advertising companies in the world, they started doing a survey about SDG awareness and SDG support in Japan in 2017. In 2017, 17% of the people asked in the survey recognized the SDGs, said they know what they're about. 2023, the last time they did the survey, 91.6% of the population of the people who in the survey, which reflects a representative sample, knew what the SDGs were, recognized the SDGs. And if you walk the streets in the business area, you'll find a lot of men in suits wearing the SDG pin. You go to schools, they teach about the SDGs. There's an 88% support for the SDGs in Japan, according to that survey. At the same time, you have the latest Pew survey about the United Nations. 54% of the people in Japan who are according to the survey, view the UN negatively, or negative views about the UN, and 44% have positive views about the UN. So what we tried to do at Expo is trying to first bring the two stories together. The SDGs would not have been possible without the United Nations. And the work that we do in the UN extends to every aspect of life, much beyond the Security Council and what happens in the headlines. It's more than the humanitarian, which is important. It's more than the peacekeeping, which is important. It's everything that actually touches our life as a global community. So what we did was design a pavilion that tells a story in a narration that makes the connections. So the first part is looking back at the last 80 years, which I would say are not 80 years of the history of the UN. It is, but it's also the history of multilateralism in its modern form. So we have the Charter of the United Nations. The first thing we put there was 1946 was a Commission on the Status of Women. So then from that, we highlighted other moments in the history of the organization where women's issues, the Convention on the Political Rights of Women, the Convention against all forms of discrimination against women, the 1995 Conference on Women, social issues. And a key social issue is gender. Then 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Then 1951, the Refugee Convention. 1989, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. 2006, Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, the rights-based approach. So you have social issues, rights issues, and of course, Millennium Declaration, SDG adoption, 1972 Environment Conference, 1979 the first Climate Conference, and you take it from there. So the idea here is that the UN is much more than the Security Council. Everything starts with a General Assembly resolution, but ends up as being a convention and then incorporated into law, and it governs the relations between countries. And that is how the world today works. It isn't perfect, but it's much better if there wasn't this kind of world. And so on. Of course, we mentioned smallpox eradication, dealing with the ozone layer, some things related to Japan, and the founding of the UN University as the first UN body based headquartered in Japan. And then there are two numbers that we mentioned. 1945, there were 51 member states and 2.2 billion people living on the planet. Fast forward, 2025, there are 193 member states and 8.6 billion people living on the planet. Those two numbers and the growth every 10 years tell two different stories. The growth from 51 to 193 is the decolonization. So the decolonization that happened, and the UN was part of the decolonization drive, is what gives many countries, first thing they want to do when they are independent is to join the United Nations. So that's one story. The population growth is the success in health and social and development, that now people live longer, we have lower mortality and so on. So that was one part. Second part is the UN in your life today, which tells the story of how different UN agencies are in people's lives in a way that they don't even know. And that people don't think that International Civil Aviation Organization is part of the UN. Well, it is. International Labour Organization. There's no UN in their name, but the work they do contributes to this whole thing. And the last part was a vision of a future which is possible. And I won't go into more details, but I can tell you we had a survey, an online survey that 40% of our visitors took. 406,828 people came through our pavilion. 40% of them did the survey. And 95% have said that their perception of the UN has improved having gone through this experience. 40% said 5 out of 5, 30% said 4 out of 5, and 25% said 3 out of 5. So in total, 95%. And other questions and similar. So there is a way that maybe communicating through a narrative can help in the same way it helped us in this pavilion. I hope it can also help scientists communicate about science. So it's complicated still, but I think we have to simplifying it by putting it in a narrative that connects to people's lives. And I think that's where science is important. We recognize also the importance of communication during COVID-19. COVID-19, it's not very, I think every one of us here, and nobody's younger than 5, so everybody knows what COVID. Anybody younger than 5 here? No. I think this is a story, we're talking about it before coming to this panel with Maha. When it first came out, based on the information that scientists and doctors knew at the time, it was going to take 10 to 12 years to create a new vaccine. And that's what WHO said. And that's what we said. And also, it was believed that it was not airborne. So masks, not necessary, just stay away from each other, isolate. And then a few months in, a bit more than a few months in, masks are necessary because it is airborne, it's important, and we have a vaccine in 9 months. So that also struck the trust in the scientists who were saying, oh, but you told us, you yourself told us. So we have to be careful about also how we say things and how we catch up on them, because it's always put the caveat, based on what we know now, this is what we can say, and this is what we cannot say. Mis and disinformation became a major part of our work because of COVID, because as WHO and any public health expert will tell you, a pandemic's key issue is communication. If you communicate well, people will get the right information, they will behave in the same way that is best to protect them and protect others, and a pandemic will be over. But if you don't communicate right, and it's all, the science, we will be there. But there was so much mis and disinformation that, of course, is now about other things, not just about COVID, that we have developed what we call the global principles on information integrity at the request of the Secretary General, because mis and disinformation have actually now been listed as one of the top threats, as if you look at any report, whether it's the World Economic Forum or global risks, the mis and disinformation is seen as one of the highest one of those. And for science and scientists, that is also going to impact you. Trust, and I know there was a previous presentation that took a trust in science and scientists, it's different from one country to the next. And again, it depends on the attitude of the leadership of those countries. If the leadership of a country are themselves spreading distrust in science and scientists, then those countries will have lower levels of trust in science and scientists. But if those leaders reinforce trust in science and scientists, then they will be better. And you can see that from those lists themselves. I think when we talk about global principles for information integrity, we don't deal with them as isolated from the different stakeholders, because any issue we deal with has to be dealt with taking into account the different stakeholders and the multiple interests that there are and the different roles that these stakeholders can. So there's there's the public, there are the media organizations, there are the social media organizations, there are the, now, of course, we have to talk about AI and the role of AI. And none of us is going to be immune from the impact of AI. There's so much now being discussed about the potential, because there is a lot of potential, and the Secretary General spoke about that. There's a great deal of potential in AI, but there is also a great deal of risk. And there's even a New York Times bestseller book, I think the title is When Somebody Invents It, All Life Will End. That's the title of the book by two AI experts. You can, I think the title is like that, but you can look it up. So the global principles, you can Google the global principles on information. I won't go, I don't think this is the time for them, but I think it's important that they offer recommendations for the advertisers, for brands, for social media, about the need for them to guard against what we see as a challenge to the world that we know and we live in. I have, like I said, been working in communication for a long time, and if you go back 20, 30 years ago, our main source of information was media organizations, whether newspapers, television stations, radio stations, maybe even online publications. And in most of them, the credible ones, there would be somebody called fact checker. I mean, I've been working for too long that I do remember being called by fact checkers in different organizations. Our journalist has reported this and this. Can you verify that this really happened, or that this report is accurate, or that this code is? I would look into it, yes or no. But now you have influencers, people with millions of followers who dig up information from the bottom of their shoe or something. I don't know where they bring it. And and then millions of people get it. And then they push it out again. And you have a mess. And we have to deal with that. And of course, all of these tools were created by scientists too. So you can blame scientists. But like anything, like AI has a great potential for good. It can also have great potential for a lot of damage. I think when we think today, historically, writing was one of the biggest inventions because it enabled humans who are good storytellers to allow knowledge to be transferred from one group that is living to a next group. So whatever was written was believed, because in those days, originally, first writing was in stone. Then ink, paper. So still, whatever was seen written, somebody who has written can read and write. They are more educated. I will trust them. So it's written. But then, of course, media developed, and then we had newspapers, and many newspapers discovered that the way to sell was to have sensationalist headlines and to maybe lie a little bit and exaggerate, and those are called the tabloids. And people started, maybe I don't believe everything that is written, which doesn't even say that it's fiction, but I will only believe it when I see the photograph. Then the photographs, of course, people can edit photographs. And now it's not just photographs. I will have to see the film, the video. And now with AI, you can actually, with deepfakes, create a real story showing Thanos dancing or whatever doing. But he's not there. He's actually at the conference. But then he could be facing trouble back in New York. We saw this video of you eating sushi on top of a camel down the Fifth Avenue, something like that. It would be possible to create such a deep fake of any of us, and then we're in trouble because we have to prove that it's not really us. That wasn't the case before. So information integrity and protecting information integrity and creating guardrails for how and when we allow AI to be used is so important. And I think the role of science and scientists in identifying and helping regulators in government, but also in the UN and other places, in making sure that this is done in a scientific and understandable way, we would really welcome that because we need it. And with that, I know that my time is up. Back to you, Kiki, and thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now open it up for, there's a lot of topics that have been introduced, so we will now open it up to a Q&A. So if anyone has a topic or a question, please join us at the microphone over here. I see some people getting up. So I will make some filler content as they come walking around. Thank you so much, Maher. And I think the AI is the AI is coming.
Well, thank you so much. I'm coming as a regular citizen. I'm not a researcher. But I would like to ask you, what will be the most strategic way to show that open science is important in a world where the biggest priorities of donors and funding and international cooperation, scholarships and stakeholders are climate change, are migration, humanitarian issues, more than 30 international conflicts going on, and where you visit developing countries in which the priorities is not precisely science, is hunger, poverty, and humanitarian issues. So what would be the best strategy to show to the world that open science is important and relevant?
That's like the $100 million question. I don't think there is a simple answer for that. I think funding, as we see, is becoming more and more difficult for public, not just for science, by the way. Last year, $2.7 trillion were the global military spending in 2024 reached $2.7 trillion, up from 2.3 trillion the year before, while global development assistance, official development assistance, dropped for the first time since 2020 to $212 billion. So for every dollar spent on development assistance, $13 are gone to military spending. So the world is leadership priorities are now more seems to be on defense, and the biggest investment in defense, in my humble view, is actually an investment in development, because that's how you can actually create stability and you give people a reason to invest themselves in the society and the community in which they live. So science can also be a tool in addressing those challenges. It's always a challenge, but I think there's more money in the private sector now than in the public sector. And there's an assault on development aid, not just in one country. It has extended to other countries. And they are all moving money to develop from development to defense, theoretically. I think people in the world, the advocating for their leaders needs to increase. I guess. I don't know.
Okay, thank you very much. I really enjoyed. I have to bend. All right, I really enjoyed the session from both of you, and I am more focused on citizen participation, on science communication, and all that. So, for me, last 2 years when we went for COP in Dubai, I came up with an initiative called Open Goals COP, and the whole idea is that, just as you said, that there are jargons, the lexicons, the terminologies in UN is so confusing. So the idea was to bring up people within the open space who are interested, scientists, advocates, and all that. So we're able to bring a lot of open organizational movements together. And the interest was so there, but then we also hit a block because there was no funding. We started with no funding, but the whole idea was an intervention that would break down some of these conversations, the huge documents that are available to be able to communicate those kind of information to the average, because you realize that even though COP is for governments, but there are grassroots communities that are also involved, and they need to also understand the issues that are going on. So what would be your advice for like a citizen like me trying to make sure these jargons get to everybody? So yeah, that's just one that I want to. And then also lastly, there was a project about communicating scientific way to people. We brought scientists, researchers together, scientists and researchers, as well as people within the art field, so that what they can do is they communicate their abstract and what they have, and then the artists will turn them into whatever they can to be able to communicate to others as well. So these are just the two things. One is just a contribution, and one is your views on how I can take the Open Goals Cup ahead. Thank you.
Again, I don't think there's one single answer to that question as well. But just before that, I want to digress a little bit and ask this. Have anyone wondered why the COP is so popular among the media and not the COP mob? Have anyone heard about the COP mob by UNEP? It's by CBD. The convention is called Convention on Biological Diversity, and no one talks about COP mob. And what is the Convention on Biological Diversity is? It's about how do we conserve our biodiversity, and it's about modern biotechnology, and it has been hijacked in a way that modern biotechnology is an enemy to biodiversity, which is not. So why I'm digressing a little bit is how all these things are hijacked by many people. It could be government, it could be even citizen participants, citizens. So when I go to COP Mob, I've been going to COP Mob for so long. Last year it was in Cali. I did not go because there's no funding. But what I see is, in the name of citizen participation, these people, the indigenous people, are brought in by people with vested interest, and then they come in and they show that how we are going to lose our livelihood because of modern biotechnology, which not in all cases is true, but they are used to show, to create the sentiments and empathy and all these things, and then derail modern technologies. So why I'm saying this is this, in this, I'm sorry to say, but in this UN huge conventions, it is like a huge circus. Thousands of people with different agenda, with different things and different language, and there's a paper with thousands of brackets, and then we remove the brackets, and so. And your question is, how can we take it back to the citizens? Now, one thing is, and again, you require resources, and that resources, it could be human power and also financial needs. So going to schools, starting with minds that has not been initiated, and talking to them about real science without contaminating science with politics and vested interest, being accurate about science, talking to teachers, so that teachers, like, I think it was one of the panels who said that, we are teaching our students are few generations before us, and we are how many generations behind, and using technology so how can teachers be updated about current developments? So I think this is one method, but there's many other areas. So using social media, but everything has to be accurate.
Yeah. No, I want to echo what you said about the unequal interest in the COP on climate and the COP on biodiversity. And I think maybe historically, now we can see, and everybody's life is impacted by climate change. Even 1970 Expo in Osaka, where people never complained about, well, it was hot in the summer, but I compared heat, the Expo current heat in the average heat in July and August in this year was 3 degrees higher than 1970. People who live in areas prone to typhoons, extreme weather conditions can see. So people see the impact on climate. Insurance companies see it. and therefore it becomes part of daily life. If a species is driven to extinction somewhere, it's not going to impact people's lives, which is, I think people should care, because what led to that extinction of that species or multiple species is eventually going to get to us as well. So we have to give them equal time, but I think it's the issue of interest and space. And to the point of science and scientists, during COVID, part of the work we did as Verified campaign is we identified a number of scientists working on the vaccine development. And it was a very simple story. We actually worked with them and gave them some TikTok tutorials, and many of them became massive in TikTok with explaining and doing good short videos about how you work with the vaccines, and they went viral. And it was one of the moments where when you get a sign, you have to find the right person, the right tool, and then they actually can communicate with the different audiences on the platforms and languages. So you have to really use that. On funding, and I think this is an issue that it's always going to come back to funding, but it doesn't always have to be the big funding. There are many stories of politicians who relied on small donations and they became, big in their country. And I give you an example from the UN. UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, an agency that I worked with, but also an agency that managed the school that I went to as a Palestine refugee, was unfairly targeted and with claims after October 7th that several countries stopped funding UNRWA, including the United States and several European countries and Japan, pending more facts about the issue. And there was a global campaign, and within the first year, $150 million were donated by individuals from different countries to support UNRWA's work, primarily in Gaza, as the backbone of the humanitarian support provided by the UN in Gaza. So just an example that funding, yes, it's important to go into the big pots, but the big pots, and they're becoming more and more demanding, more and more. But I think maybe there could be some creative way to create some crowd rise funding for science and scientists. Maybe somebody can start that. It's a new startup.
Just to note, we have about 5 minutes and some questions to get through. So,
hello. I found both of your presentations very insightful, so thank you for that. And I originally had 2 questions, but I'm only going to ask one. My question is actually about science for diplomacy or diplomacy for science. I know you said you didn't want to go into it, but due to the fact that I'm double majoring in international affairs and political science, I couldn't help but be interested in it. So can you please give me a little short insight or overview of what it is about?
Take an hour, but very quickly, it's science for diplomacy, diplomacy for science. So just for example, the Antarctica project, right? It's not a one country project, it's multiple countries. But then when they work together, how do they negotiate things and who owns what? So that's where diplomacy comes in. You negotiate science using diplomacy. And then when we are talking about peace or so many other conflicts, global conflicts, where we bring in science and science works for diplomacy. Science builds the diplomacy. So in a nutshell, yeah.
Thank you so much. Also, Mr. Maher, I have a question after the conference, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Hello. I would like to add a little bit to the list of way forward in science communication, and maybe sort of as a cautionary tale, trying to explicitly say that, yes, we want to train researchers to know how to communicate better with different stakeholders, because the way to communicate between peers or with policymakers or with the general public is different. We should state that we don't want the scientists to do everything. As early career researchers, we already have a lot of things to do, and adding more to the plate is kind of overwhelming sometimes. So trying to maybe build different career paths for scientists to participate in different parts of the production process knowledge production process instead of trying to make every scientist try to do everything. So, for example, in Mexico, one of the recent changes in the assessment policies was to value scientific communication, but they did it in a way that it seemed like it was mandatory for everyone to do. So this was like in a different direction. They tried to do it, but they needed a little bit more, like making it not mandatory.
I think that's a question really for scientific institutions, not scientists. Because some scientists need to focus on the science, and you can't rightly expect every scientist to be a great communicator. Not everyone is a born communicator. The best tool of communications is being able to tell stories. So if you're a good storyteller, I mean, I never studied communications. I like stories. I studied civil engineering, and that's it. I tell stories. Not everybody can do it. Let's find those who can, and then institutions need to come behind them, and then they can really simplify the messages from the others.
I think because this is very important, I must dispel this, that science communicators does not have to be scientists. I'm a trained scientist, but yeah, and I took this path. My PhD supervisor from Australia is a science journalist, and he did his PhD in science communication journalism, and he was my PhD supervisor. So science communicator can just be anyone, not trained in science, but who takes interest in science. And of course, you have to do a bit of research, not go back to the lab, but do literature research and make it credible. It could be a science journalist. It could be just anyone. It could be anyone who is doing science communication.
And I'm so sorry, this will be our last question. Can you make sure to share your affiliation? I'm so sorry. No, you can be the last one, yeah, and share your affiliation.
Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Felicia. I'm from the Association of African Universities. So I have a question related to measuring impact. How are we really able to demonstrate value for science communication so that it's prioritized by institutions? Is it through policy, changes? Is it through community engagement, beside perhaps some key statistics that we may have to show? How will we really demonstrate so they can, value it and prioritize it as such? Thank you.
I don't know why this session gets all the tough questions. Again, a very tough, there's no real answer. But then, some countries do science, like Eurobarometer. They do the science literacy level every year, or I don't know how often it's done. In Malaysia, we do that as well. I don't know if it's still being done. So basically, science literacy, measuring science literacy of a country. Again, that is not the golden standard, but then how much, I think it's also how much things are commercialized. If you go to any universities, you go to the tech transfer office, you will see on the glass shelf all the things that's ready for commercialization sitting there for years. So how much is commercialized? How many youths taking up technopreneurship, becoming technopreneurs? How much of policies that's science-based, science-enabling? So I think these are all the different measures that shows is there science literacy among all stakeholders, including politicians and policymakers and many others.
Maybe I just want to add, I think open science and the concept of open science is relatively new. And I think sometimes one has to think about how and what has worked in terms of measuring impact. When UNDP came up in the mid-80s with the Human Development Index, and they started publishing the Human Development Index, the first couple of years, nobody paid attention. And now most countries and most development ministries, they will go to the Human Development Index and see where are we on the scale, have we gone up, have we gone down. A few years ago, 10 years ago or something, the world, Bhutan proposed with a number of other countries, the International Day of Happiness, 21st of March. And subsequently, a report is published every year, the World Happiness Index. And again, many countries and many people were looking at this with sarcasm initially. And now people are looking, oh my God, Finland has been #1 happiest country in the world for the last 5 years. What are they doing? And so on. And if you, by the way, if you look at the SDG implementation, there's somebody who does SDG implementation index, which countries are on the top of the SDG implementation. almost the 5 top countries on the SDG implementation are the 5 top countries in the happiness index. Maybe that's a good way to advocate for the SDGs. But I think maybe somebody could create an open science or develop some criteria and start publishing or doing and collecting data and index. Maybe that can be one way to measure things. It's more work, but maybe that can work. Well, thanks.
Thank you both so much. And that concludes our final panel today. I will move to the podium to actually introduce Thanos again. Thank you so much for that fantastic last panel. And now I will hand the podium back over to Thanos, who will close out our conference officially. Thank you.
The Petri dish. So, okay, we came full circle. I think we had some wonderful 3 days, some lovely discussions. We had, yeah, so there's a lot to unpack. We're working, there have been note takers throughout the sessions, and I want to include that in my thanks to the UN University. Please expect the outcome document, but give us some time. There's a lot to unpack here in 3 days of the conference. So the outcome document, as well as the communique of the advisory committee, will be released on the website of the library, not just of the library website, excuse me, of the conference website, which is hosted by the UN Hammarskjöld Library. I also think that what Maher mentioned is important, that the conference doesn't end today. I myself had a couple of discussions with interesting ideas that we can push forward. Because the UN is going through this situation, my team does not have the capacity to have this conference every year. However, there have been 3 proposals for regional meetings, and I will look to our colleagues from UNESCO and our colleagues from DESA to co-organize this, because it will not be possible just for our team to organize this. And please follow the communications that will be sent out carefully, not too many communications to clog your inboxes. I want to thank our keynote speakers. There's so many things there that were mentioned. I want to thank Maggie Walter for reminding us that indigenous people need a seat at the table, reminding us about the principle of care, which we will make sure to elevate in the outcome document. There was also an interesting proposal into that discussion for the potential of working with UNESCO on a side event on just that principle for the UN Indigenous Permanent Forum that will be coming up, and I think we are in position to assist with that. I want to thank Dr. Yuko Harayama, and there were so many points in your keynote that I would like to stop. There's not enough time. I'm just going to say that this conference is actually showing that no one is alone. You are not alone in the scientific ecosystem, and open science is operating within the larger society. And thank you very much for reminding us about that. And also to the keynote panel, my colleague, Mr. Maher Nasser, and our second joint keynote speaker, Ms. Maha, for their putting the whole conference also into the perspective of what's happening in the society and what's happening online. I would like, in particular, to thank the advisory committee of the conference. There was one lesson I learned by participating in the meetings of the advisory committee with my esteemed colleague, Meg Swatza, and there was a lot of learning. There was a learning curve for us in this advisory committee. However, what we learned is that, when people come together and share their perspective, then there are bridges that are being built and there is understanding. And there is always a consensus that is being reached. Follows, we have to discuss, we have to express the perspective where we come from with this opinion, with this position. And I think that understanding was very visible, including in the last conference of the committee. In particular, I want to thank Ms. Ariana Becerril Garcia, Mr. Breg Zanen, Ms. Carolina Botero, our long-standing collaborator for this conference, Professor Jeffrey Bolton, Mr. Juan Pablo Alperin, Ms. Marcia Barbosa, Mr. Nick Socchi, Mr. Rezi Raju, Professor Yasuhiro Murayama, and Dr. Yancy Flores Buenso. I'm sorry if I mixed up your titles, but I know that you're all professors and doctors, so I'm sorry for skipping that. But I want to thank you all very much for your contributions and the guidance and the advice that we received, and make sure that we will proceed with the communique and build on those actions, which we will transfer to, as soon as we go back, we will transfer the Department of Economic and Social Affairs to the team that manages the implementation of the Pact for the Future. But rather than me giving this little summing up, I think it might be a good opportunity to close this conference by giving the floor to some early career researchers that did not have the opportunity to reach the program of the conference already. And I want to invite them here one by one or all together to just give us a couple of sentences, what they like, what they did not like, what they want to see about this conference, because at the end of the day, we're doing this conference for you. You're the future leaders of the scientific community, and we want to work with you and assist you in that. So please introduce yourself and your affiliation and just.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm a medical student from Greece, and I'm here with the International Federation of Medical Students Associations. We represent more than 1.5 million medical students from more than 120 countries all over the world. And it's really a pleasure to be here after working in open access and open science for more than 15 years as an organization. So what I wanted to say that for students, open science is a lived reality. We really need it. It's from the articles that we can't access to write our thesis or just to learn topics, but also in medicine, it's the reality that there are doctors that don't know that this medication exists or don't know for this procedure, and this keeps people from saving lives. But of course, open science gives us hope for collaboration, transparency, and that certain knowledge can help us make education and medicine more fair for everyone. We see also new movements in the medical sector. I don't know if you know this, but there's a movement that's called, I think, Open Drug, and it's for manufacturers to open up the procedures and protocols that they're using for medication so they can be brought up into a local level and produced on a local level. Because during the pandemic, this was a huge issue. The medication was controlled only from the big companies, and the borders were closed, so there were no medication in a lot of countries, and of course it was a huge issue in Africa. And we know, and we discussed here a lot, and thank you for bringing this up, that there are also restrictions and there are concerns about misuse, data privacy, and the quality of the data that we have. But I think that the answer, it's not to limit access, but rather build capacities. There's so much information and we need to be prepared. We need to prepare the new generation. We're already here. And thank you also for having us here to share our opinions. And in this way, we can help have a responsibility and being ethical and effective in the way we work. And I wanted to mention that we're here with you, like all of us, the youth, and we're ready to work and work together to have a world where open access is met with accountability. And the future of science is open. And if it's not open, it won't be equitable. So I want to close with this. And again, thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Manuel Brucoleri from Argentina. I'm gonna be concise. First, I wanna thank you the opportunity of being here. I think the main learning of this conference is that open access is the path of scientific knowledge democratization. In these times in which a lot of speeches put in risk democracy, believe me, I come from Argentina. Defending open access, I think, is a way of defending democracy from the scientific field. So I want to thank you very, very much for this unforgettable and unique opportunity. Thank you, Thanos. Thank you, Jensi, and all the team.
I'll try to be quick because I had a lot of time. I took the opportunity to participate even if I wasn't in the panels. Yeah, I really like that we have a lot of people talking about this because in my circles in research, there's no one that's talking about this kind of thing. And I like learning about the challenges and the promises of these topics. And especially I like to highlight that we talked about a lot of trying to change the incentive system to try to implement this important topic of open science in general, so that we can try to bridge the gap between academia, science, and society. So thank you so much for making this possible and inviting us. Oh, yeah, again, I'm Oscar Guerrero. I'm from the Global Young Academy, representing young early career researchers around the world. And I'm also a co-president of the Mexican Young Academy. So, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Alexander Martinez from Colombia, and it has been an incredible experience being here, an opportunity to meet amazing people, to learn from each other, and to recognize ourselves as a community, as a global community. And that's my point here. We need to keep strengthening those bonds to face the rapid change we are facing these times. There are new agendas, new technologies that are in place, so we have to react to this as a community. Everything is moving so fast, like this event, it was very fast. And that's why open science is necessary, but not only open and inclusive and very robust science is so necessary to face this. And this is with this connection that we can face the new change and we can shape the future for the global humanity. So thank you so much for this amazing opportunity.
Thank you. I'm Bishes Khanal from Nepal, and thanks for having me here, giving this opportunity. It has been a unique learning experience. It's, I think, one of the first conferences. I've been to many conferences, but mostly purely scientific and academic, and this is with the UN ecosystem, and had really a lot of opportunity to see lots of things which now I can connect the kinds where I have doing a research, that's one part, but I also went back to Nepal after living in Europe and UK to establish a new research center with extreme low resource. And the idea is to how can you build excellent centers that are at global level, but with low resource in countries where it doesn't exist. And we started from scratch with pocket money, with no core funding yet, to a 47 full-time staff with nearly 100 publications in top tier things. And what was important was the open science helps doing this, but there are also challenges. And here in the whole conference, what I realized is the way we think, we use different words, but here there are a lot of words, a lot of work have been done. But it's also a unique position now because we focus on AI and it's everybody's interest. Sometimes we say, oh, it's a hype, maybe it's more hype, it's something that we've seen in the world, but I still believe this is a unique position because it's something at a very fundamental level where maybe we're seeing something we hadn't seen in the past. And what I would like to end with is to challenge every one of us to think on what I call as the big alignment. Sometimes where you have this immense potential with AI, but equally the risks are also there's a lot. And when we think of potential, it's the social good. AI for social good, you can think of healthcare, agriculture, education, governance, health. All these sectoral things could be transformed with right development, right advances, and right use of AI. But if we do just think of this independently, I think there is a problem, because there's another very important part is the economic equity. How the potential of AI in terms of global market and the way the world economy works in the current system, and the current the unit of countries as individual units, and the way import-export trade deficits work. There's a big challenge, even if it's with good intentions to do social good with AI, if this economic disparity in terms of import, export, and ability to produce and be a producer of these technologies, and not just the consumers. This is really important. And I think we should also challenge science and economists to really try to figure this out. And I would like to end with this challenge to everyone, including myself. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I'm going to talk in Spanish because I represent Mexico and the other person in Latin America.
My name is Abel, and I represent the regional student group from the International Computational Biology Society or Association. And throughout these last few days in the conference, I have learned that science should transform. We need to open knowledge, and we must especially not leave anyone behind. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zandim Kwanazi from South Africa, and I work at University of Cape Town. I'm a librarian there. I'm also doing my master's, and I am focusing on AI. So it's been very, very interesting to hear a lot about AI and how it's being integrated into open science. So, and I'm also very honored to be invited here. And I'm very, very new in open sciences, so there's still a lot for me to go back and unpack. And I'm hoping that more opportunities like this will come through so that I can, improve on, everything. Thank you.
So with our thanks also to our funders, the North American Philanthropic Institution, PLOS, Science Europe, ISCME. Am I forgetting something? I think it's 3 days and slowly I'm shutting down, so I'm sorry for that. But yeah, and also thank also to our online participants. We had over 1,500 people participating online, and I know there are a lot of people that have signed up to receive the recordings. I think it's time to bid you farewell, and thank you very, very much for your participation, and Ubuntu for open science. Let's work together. Correcting over 2,000 participants. I was just checked, so online, yeah.